Okay, thank you so much, Marie. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this collaborative event between the Foster Leadership Center and the Career and Professional Readiness Center. My name is Michael Gallagher. I'm the director of our Foster Leadership Center on campus. Before we start, I would like to invite everyone to mute yourselves unless you are speaking so as not to disrupt the event.
It's right now. I'm in it right now.
This workshop is about creating a digital presence. Students need to be prepared for a world which is vastly different from even less than a year ago. It is vital to be prepared for the digital workplace. Tonight, we hope to introduce you to tools and resources necessary to navigate the new workplace landscape. We will hear from our speaker, and then hopefully we'll have a vibrant discussion and a hands-on workshop. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker tonight. Joe Torreggiani is a technologist, a researcher, educator, and activist that has dedicated his career to doing the most good that he can do. For over a decade, Joe has focused his work and research on solving a problem posed by the American architect and designer R. Buckminster Fuller. And I quote, "Make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological damage or disadvantage to anyone." End quote. This singular pursuit has led Joe to become a core technical contributor at impact-driven organizations across multiple domains. Today, he is a senior software engineer where he is building tools to empower people to participate and thrive in the economy. He is also a co-founder of the Sustainable Progress and Equality Collective, SPEC, which is an open learning organization that empowers individuals to be catalysts for positive change through mentorship, training, action research, and service learning. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael, for that introduction. So before I get started, I'm going to just share my screen real quick so we can get to the presentation. Okay. You see my screen okay? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So thanks everyone again for having me to speak here today. I'm really excited to share a bunch of different information that I hope will be helpful with you as you move forward in this new world, as Michael was describing. So we're going to be talking about executing a successful digital presence. And before we get started, go over a little bit about myself. So who am I? As Michael said, I'm Joe Torreggiani. I'm a senior software engineer, and I'm a co-founder of the Sustainable Progress and Equality Collective. What is SPEC? SPEC is an open learning organization that empowers individuals to be catalysts for positive change. We founded SPEC about 6 months ago, so we're a very new organization. We really started in response to COVID as well as the social unrest that we were seeing. And we developed ourselves as an open organization, open learning organization, which really means that we work transparently, we openly share knowledge, and we continuously improve by integrating participant feedback and research. This really is the goal of that quote that Michael had said earlier, which is that in order to solve the world's biggest problems, we have to be able to work together spontaneously and really be focused on not hurting people in the process. And what that means in practice for SPEC is that SPEC is working completely openly. So we're currently hosted on an organization or on a platform called Open Collective, where you can actually, I'll show later on, you can see every dollar that we've donated to the organization, as well as every dollar that we pay our contributors and learners. And what are we actually doing, right? This is great if we're doing open learning, but what does that mean in practice? It means that we're providing mentoring, training, internships, and hosting events, kind of like this one here today, focus on helping individuals from underrepresented backgrounds learn the essential skills required to build sustainable careers. And why that's so important is because it's really hard to help somebody else if you can't help yourself. And so the goal is that if we can help enough people get into sustainable careers and have financial independence, then they'll be able to go on and make a positive impact in their communities. And that's also what leads into why I'm here today. So why am I here? I'm here to help you build your digital brands, to use remote collaboration tools, as we are at SPEC right now, prepare for remote work experiences, because that's most likely the type of experiences you're going to be seeing in your in the next year or so. And then I hope also, in addition to focusing on digital presence and digital branding, to inspire you to make a difference with your careers. That's been my focus, and I hope that some of you will feel like you want to do the same. And so a little bit about my own background. I'm from New York's Hudson Valley region originally. I graduated from the College of St. Rose in Albany, New York. I majored in history and minored in philosophy. I studied engineering at SUNY New Paltz, but I didn't finish that, and I'll talk about that later, about not actually finishing that degree. I studied at General Assembly's Web Development Bootcamp in New York City. And I currently work in the financial services industry as a software engineer. And I currently live in San Francisco with my spouse, Veronica, and our dog, Molly. So this whole presentation is about digital presence. So I think it's important to define what digital presence is before we kind of move forward. So what is your digital presence? It's your presence in this is the space that your brand owns online. And what that means basically is, if you have a personal website, if you have, your own company or your own social media accounts, your listings in business directories, if you're a contractor or you're looking for work in the gig economy, so that would be like Monster.com or Craigslist or Upwork, and the searches that your website shows up for. So it's not great if someone tries to Google you and you don't show up. And any organizations, events, publications that you actively participate in. And so that means if you're blogging on a platform like WordPress or Medium. And so what's your personal brand, or what's your digital brand? They're very closely related. Ultimately, your personal brand identifies who you are as a leader, how you treat people, and how you want to be known in and out of the office. And so the important distinction is that your digital presence is basically just all the footprint of where you are on the internet, where your personal brand is what's going to be communicated by your digital presence. And you want your digital presence to really highlight your personal brand. That's really what's important. And so, since most of the folks here that we're talking about are in college and going to be looking at entering the job market, I wanted to kind of take you in the journey of how my digital presence started and really how it got me from college to where I am today. And so what was my digital presence when I was in college? Well, I had a Facebook. I had Google+, which probably most of you don't know because that predates you, but it was Google's attempt at a social network. And then I had a resume on Monster.com and Craigslist, and that was it. That was my whole digital presence. And what was my digital brand? I didn't have one. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was doing with my life, and I definitely wasn't able to articulate well what my digital brand online was. Ultimately, it was just a jumble of words. It was just the things that I had done. And, I had graduated college. At the time, I was tutoring. I studied history. So I kind of felt like I was a historian or whatever that meant. I knew I had research skills and I was a writer. I was working as a waiter when I graduated from college, and I was a volunteer. But that's not really a digital brand. That's really just buzzwords or keywords of what I was. And it wasn't coherent. And how did this affect my job search? Well, I wasn't getting any callbacks. I wasn't getting any email responses. No interviews or job offers in my field of study. So I had a very good grades in college. I was graduated magna cum laude. I had all the things that you're supposed to do when you were in college. But despite that, I still wasn't, just having the credentials wasn't enough really to get past that barrier. And ultimately, I couldn't articulate my personal brand. So if someone asked me like, who you are as a professional, I didn't know yet because I didn't have the job experience. I really could only speak to my experience in college. This is also just a side note. If you're in college and you haven't done internships, do internships, because I didn't have, that was one way to get job experience, because once you're out of college, it's a lot harder to get that experience if you haven't done internships. So what did I do once I was hitting this wall? That was a really hard thing. I had graduated from college. I didn't know what to do next. So I started building experience any way I could. I also started reading a lot. And so I think this is really important, because I graduated college and I had done a lot of reading in college for all my classes. And when I graduated, the first thing I needed to do was learn a bunch more. That was just coming, flat out. That was the most important thing. The good thing is my college experience prepared me to do the research that I needed. But I didn't go to school to talk about digital presence. A lot of this that I'm talking about was done, as I went to figure things out. So this is really important, is that, building experience, you have to take control and do that yourself, but also you're going to continue to learn along the way. And so, like I said, I took any job I could and I volunteered. I went back to work at the same restaurant that I worked at when I was in college. I was a busser and then a waiter. I landscaped with my friend's dad, who, gave me some experience doing landscaping. I became a volunteer EMT. I actually went through the process of becoming EMT, and I was on call for my local fire department. I worked at Bed Bath & Beyond doing retail stock and sales associate. If you see the common theme, none of these things are what I went to school for, and none of them is what I necessarily wanted. But I needed to make money and I needed to get experience on my resume. It didn't matter. And each one of these things actually helps in a different way as you build experience. And you'll also see the kind of trajectory. Eventually, I got into working for a construction company, and I worked as a construction equipment manager, driving a van around. Then I became assistant project manager. I continued to tutor. I started doing website administration for that construction company. And eventually, as I started developing some web development skills, I started doing that as well, building more experience. I also went back to college. I just had got out, and I wasn't out for very long before I realized that I needed further education. My degree in history and philosophy gave me the ability to teach a lot to myself, but I also recognized that the types of jobs I was getting interested in, I wasn't 100% sure what it was, but I knew that I needed more skills. And so I went back to school. I went to both SUNY New Paltz and SUNY Dutchess. I took classes like Biology 1, Physics, Chemistry 1 and 2. These were all the kind of prereq courses for STEM. I did college algebra and calculus. And something that's important to note about these is that I was horrible at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in high school and in college. In college, I took math for all practical purposes, which was the math class you took if you didn't want to do math. And I got a C in it. So I was not good at any of these things. And it was a challenge, but being an adult student and being very dedicated to building my career, that was a big difference. And eventually I was able to do well in those courses. Then I took Introduction to Engineering, and eventually I took Computer Programming for engineers. And those two courses kind of clicked, that engineering and software was something that I was interested in. And I also found that programming had a lot of similarities to philosophy and the things that I learned about in logic. So they kind of gave me a leg up when I started getting into engineering. The other thing, again, I want to stress how important this self-directed period of learning was for myself. The first and foremost, even today, I will say that after I took that boot camp and I went to SUNY New Paltz and all these other things, most of what I've learned now as an engineer or software engineer is been through free and low cost resources on the internet. Now you need to know how to get them and how to utilize them, but they are out there and there's lots of great resources. Khan Academy I used, it's got great resources for learning math. And so as I kind of rebuilt my understanding of mathematics, I used Khan Academy. edX, Coursera, Udacity, Udemy. These are all really great courses that have free versions of their courses, as well as you can pay for certificates. And I did a lot of those things to continue to build up my portfolio and my skill sets. And so, like I mentioned, I went to General Assembly. General Assembly is a coding boot camp. And the idea of a coding boot camp is really what a coding boot camp is doing is breaking down the core skills you need to get a job as a software developer. This is different than a computer science degree. You do a 4-year computer science degree, but you don't necessarily focus on just the engineering or the web development component. And so the idea is that you can do like a 3-month intensive course like I did in New York City, and you can learn the skills that are central to getting an entry-level job in software engineering. There are a lot of other boot camps. So General Assembly was one of the only ones that was in New York City at the time that I had gone. But now there's Free Code Academy, which is online, and it's really great. And I highly recommend it, no matter what you're interested in. It's a good resource. App Academy is another one that's come on the market that's really great. Their model is basically you don't really pay them until you get your job. So they're highly motivated to make, one, they're very selective. So you kind of need to know some stuff before you get in there. But then they're going to really make sure that they're going to get you hired, because they're going to take a percent of your first year salary. Flatiron School is a school in New York City that's also popular. Hack Reactor is I think they have a couple locations, including San Francisco. Turing School of Software and Design is based out of Colorado, but they have online programs. And I know a couple of our interns at Spec have used them in the past. Full Stack Academy, and then Grace Hopper program at Full Stack Academy, which is specifically for women. And so this is just a handful. There are a lot of really great boot camps, and not all the boot camps are focused on software engineering. So many of the other marketable skills out there, one thing I found is being multidisciplinary is really important, or it's marketable. So, just because you have a background in humanities doesn't mean that you can't pick up something else. You don't have to be just what you went to school for. What you went to school for can be a part of your skill set, right? So design is one of the things that you can do at boot camp, or you can take courses at college, or you can add a minor in. UI UX research, which is user interface and user experience design, which is highly related to psychology as well as ergonomics. And it's really focused on how do you build products that people want to use, and products that are easy to use. Product and project management. These are really important skills. I think project management may be one of the most undersold fields of study. Is not a lot of people are like, oh, I want to become a project manager. It is one of the most important things. If you want to start a startup, learn project management. You want to start a company, do project management. You want to work in a nonprofit, you need project management. Product management is slightly different, but it's really focused on the management of product development. But in many companies, product management and project management have overlap. And all the courses that I mentioned previously have great resources for both product and project management. Customer success. If you're somebody who has great interpersonal communication skills, you can work in the field of customer success. That means you're taking help phone calls, or you're helping onboard people with a new product. The customer success is also really, really important to many tech companies, and you don't need to be an engineer to do it, and you can still get a good job and have benefits. Obviously, sales is always in high demand, and information technology, which is related to software engineering, but it's more focused on really the getting people set up with their technology and making sure that the networking is connected. And so how did I eventually upgrade my digital presence after doing all this? I built a personal website. I developed a digital portfolio. I created a LinkedIn account, which, to be honest, I really didn't want to. And it was even harder because my dad was the one who's telling me, he's like, you got to get on LinkedIn. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But to be honest, that was probably one of the most important digital presence components to help me eventually get a job. I created a GitHub account. I'll talk about GitHub later, but this is really related to people who are interested in doing software development. I made my profile picture consistent across all my websites. This may seem silly, but it does really help you create a consistent digital brand across your online presence. and I made an HTML version of my resume. I won't go into what exactly HTML is, but basically the whole internet, when you see the internet, what you're seeing right now is actually HTML, and your browser shows you HTML. What I mean by making HTML version is that my personal website had a version of my resume that you could see easily. The idea here is that ultimately these were all the things that I did before I could get a job. So previously I had no digital presence, I had no digital brand. And ultimately what all of this translated into, like I said previously, I didn't have a personal brand. Then my personal brand kind of started to transform from not really knowing what I was doing or what I was trying to describe myself as. But then I kind of started, just like Michael said in the beginning of what my digital brand is, or that I've been dedicated to making the world better. At the time, I was understanding myself as that I had a lot of different skills. I was focused on making impact with those skills, and that I was kind of a multidisciplinary problem solver. And so when I was taking job interviews or describing myself and describing the things that I was bringing to the table, I could point to the different components of my digital presence to essentially make the argument that I was worth hiring. And so how did these changes affect my job search? So I went from being a college grad with not much experience, and like I mentioned before, I wasn't getting anything. I wasn't really hearing back from anyone. Now I started receiving callbacks. So when I would call and say, hey, I'm interested in this, they would call me back. I would hear replies to my applications. I would get past initial phone screens. So when I was talking to them, many times they would be like, I looked at your website, it was really impressive. Or I looked at your LinkedIn, the things that you're describing on your LinkedIn are really, I could actually have things to talk about during those presentations. It wasn't just a resume that said, I graduated in 2010, and I have good grades. I had more to say than just that I had a degree. And then the important thing in this industry and many other industries is that job recruiters use LinkedIn to find talent. And so before I was the one who was constantly reaching out to people, now recruiters were hitting me up on LinkedIn saying, hey, you're really interesting. We want you to, we have somebody who we think would be a good fit for you. And eventually I received job offers in New York City and San Francisco. And so in the case of the job in San Francisco, a recruiter reached out to me. They were interested. And so I did an online technical screen where I had to show that I was able to do some coding. They flew me out to San Francisco after that initial screen. So this was completely foreign to me that a company was going to pay for me to fly to another city to do an interview. I took my interview. They tested me on a bunch of different things. I think the most important thing that they tested me on was my communication skills. Obviously, knowledge of a thing, in this case, it was the Ruby programming language, understanding how web applications work. And remember, when we're talking about web applications, these are all the things you're using every single day. And then my problem solving, my collaboration abilities. We're going to talk about remote collaboration in a little bit. And then ultimately my interest and enthusiasm for educational technology. So having a diverse set of interests that I could come to the table and have in that interview about the things I was interested in. And these are things that they saw on my digital presence, right? During the interview, they bring things up that they saw on your LinkedIn or your personal website or in your personal portfolio. And so I got the job and I moved to San Francisco. 5 years later, now I'm a senior software engineer and an engineering manager. And just share, how is this, how has my job changed my life? I was working 100% remote way before everyone has moved remote. So I've been working for remote for over 5 years. I have good pay and benefits. I get to work with an amazing group of people. I'm getting to help economically power people and small businesses. And, it's a nice perk that I get brand new laptop when you start a new job. And what are some highlights from my career? I got to build a mobile app that went into the App Store and Google Play. I implemented an automated call center for a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. I've helped students save millions of dollars in textbooks and course materials, possibly maybe even some of you. Facilitated colleges to move to digital course materials across the world. So that's just some of the stuff that I've got to do since I've changed this career. And then other things that my job has allowed me to do, it's allowed me to live in San Francisco and in the Plymouth, United Kingdom. I've been able to travel to Mexico, France, and the Netherlands. I was able to receive $50,000 as part of a startup acquisition, which is completely foreign to me before I got into this field. I was able to pay off all of my student loans, which when I graduated from college, I thought I would never be able to do that. And then I started a non-governmental organization, like I mentioned before, SPEC. So that's kind of the highlight where I got, but I want to also talk a little bit about remote collaboration tools, which is, things like Slack and MS Teams, which are chat tools. So you're able to chat with people at all different times and be able to communicate. You have Google Suite and Office 360. Those are things like docs and spreadsheets. If you're using them already, I'm sure you are. These are critical for business operations. Project management software like Trello and Jira, site builders and content management systems like WordPress, Squarespace, and Wix, which you can also build your personal websites with. And then code hosting platforms like GitHub and Bitbucket, which are also kind of social platforms for people in the digital space. And how are these remote collaboration tools related or related to your digital brand? Work is increasingly happening online. So the way that you work using remote collaboration tools is part of your digital presence. Communicating online affects how people perceive your digital brand. And you will be demonstrating your leadership and your professionalism online. So the way that you're using things like Zoom and Slack and all of these other tools, that's going to present to other people. And that's going to potentially determine whether you get promotions or you get hired at all. And so how can you prepare for remote work experiences? Try the free trial versions of these tools that we're talking about. Use Slack, which is one of the chat programs with your group of friends, and just learn how to use it. Use it to set up, meetings with your friends. Manage your personal projects using Trello. It's a really great tool if you have lots of different things you're working on to organize. Create a professional signature for your email account. I know that sounds silly, but it actually matters when you're emailing a lot. Build a personal website. You don't need to be a website developer to build a personal website. And then use a search engine to find examples of other people's digital brands. I did a lot of that, just finding other people and the way that they're presenting themselves online. And then try to find small contracts in your respective fields. If you're a writer, try to even do some freelance writing. If you're interested in photography, see if you can find even offering to do some photos for a friend. And then you can put that on your digital portfolio. And so just to share with you my digital presence now. So this is my personal website that I have now. I did build this one myself. And it's going to be a little different than the way you have your website now, because I have a lot more experience. So I don't have things like my resume. It's not really as important anymore. As you get, especially in my industry, as you get more experience, your resume becomes less and less important as much as what you've done. But the thing that I really want to point out here is, this is part of my digital presence, but this is really what my digital and my personal brand is, which is that I'm on a mission to do the most good I can do. That's why I'm here tonight. I'm offering what I have to say, because I hope that it will help somebody, at least one person in this presentation tonight. And every day that I work, I hope that I'm able to make a difference. And that's what I've dedicated my career to. And I think the thing that I really want to leave you all with about your digital brand is that the more genuine it is, the more it's going to translate and throughout your presence on all of your social media. If you can craft something that really speaks to who you are as an individual and what you want to do with your lives, people see that and they respond and they'll reach out to you and say, wow, this is really impactful. This is what I want. And this website has a lot of what I talked about tonight, about some of the things that I've done. It also has a little bit about my story, about where I am and what I've been doing with my own life, as well as my skills and research areas. And then it gives a way for people to contact me. It's very simple, but I have other places that people can learn more about me, right? So from here, I can go to my LinkedIn and I can see here. Again, my LinkedIn is going to look a little different than yours. When I was first getting into the contract world, now I just have a string of professional companies that I've been working for. But when I started, I had a lot more written for each one of my contracts. So your LinkedIn will transform over time the way you use it. Now I don't need to write as much as my job experience can speak for itself. But again, I'm keeping my picture consistent, and the same thing. This is my Twitter, and I have the same. I have the same thing. My mission is the most good I can do. This is what the organization I started. This is the organization that I work for, and then these are the core things that I'm focused on. And on all of the different platforms that I have very consistent, in what I'm doing. So that's all I have for the presentation. I can also demo some of the tools that we talked to, but Michael, I don't know if you want to just open to questions, and then we can kind of talk about that, and maybe with the questions we can talk about some of the different platforms.
I do want to thank you so much, Joe. You have such a powerful message, and I thank you for sharing it with us. I do want to get into looking at different examples of some of the stuff that our students are going to be using, and I also want to try to fire off, get some students to fire off some questions. And, one of the questions that I had was, how do you actually go about developing a portfolio that shows that you're capable,
Definitely. It's hard. And I think that one of the first things that I really found was that, just finding jobs, whatever jobs I could have to start building experience, that was one thing. And I think the other thing is that sometimes you have to just kind of create projects for yourself. And so in software, that's definitely something that's much easier, because you can kind of think of an idea or an app idea and you can kind of start building things. But even with that, one of the projects I worked on was a software project, but it was for, it was a local paintball business. And that paintball business had like no digital presence. So digital presence goes for businesses just as much as it goes for people. And so I had no digital presence. And so what I ended up doing is working with a friend of mine who had a background in film. And we developed essentially like a promo video for that organization. And so I was able to work with a handful of people that I knew who had different skills. One person who knew audio, another person who knew film, a graphic designer, and we produced this kind of promotional video. And that was part of my digital portfolio, that video, as well as the 3 other people I work with all could use that as their digital portfolio. So finding collaborators and thinking of ways that you can leverage the skills you have. Like, I didn't know anything about video production, but I knew that this company needed something like that to help promote their brand. And so I worked with other people, and I was able to still talk about that. And that was actually, I talked about that specific project in my interview when I flew out to San Francisco, because they asked me, did I have any experience managing anyone? And I was like, yeah, I managed a designer. I managed, a graphic designer. I worked with this video production person. I helped put the whole thing together. And that was an experience that I was able to speak to.
That's awesome. It's really true. You really enjoy doing the work. And they always told me, do something you enjoy, and it's taken me a long time to put that into practice. So what I was thinking maybe we could do is I'd like to invite people to ask questions through the chat. And while that's happening, maybe you can demonstrate some of the tools that you wanted to demonstrate.
Great. Yeah. So
we
I can
maybe do both at the same time, sort of,
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I know I threw out a lot of technologies. And so the one that I mentioned before was Trello. And so, and then also feel free as I'm going, if people are posting in the chat, I can answer to those questions too.
I will do.
So Trello, I mentioned, is a project management software, and there's lots out there. Trello is very common, especially for smaller companies as they're getting started. And it's a really simple idea, which is that you have this kind of project board and you can create any kind of list you want. And so I just created an example one here to show you what this would look like from the ground up. And this is a common scenario, which is like to do, doing, done. And I'm able to drag these cards. I can create another one, which is like, talk about Trello. And I can double click on this. and I can add a different additional thing. So I can add checklists. So if I want to say, what should I talk about? Might include checklists, might include due dates, members. These are all things. So I can add this checklist, and then I can assign this to somebody. So I'll just assign the spec client. And so basically now I can see that I have this this card. It's assigned to Sustainable Progress and Equality Collective, and that there's 3 items on that card. And so it also gives the ability to add comments to this card, as well as add additional labels. So I can set this to be, something like maybe easy. So this is an easy one to talk about Trello. And let me actually add it. There you go. And then it's an easy way to kind of start organizing your projects. So you might have a bunch of to-do tasks, and then you can kind of drag them in here. You can see what you're doing, and then finally you can drag them and they're done. It seems simple, but as you start developing it, for example, this is what our project board for our organization. So we have like 10 people in here. These are all the projects that we're currently working on. These are all the different things that we've done in the last couple of weeks. These terms, Icebox, backlog, and current sprint, they come from software development, but it's a similar idea. This is kind of to do, doing, done, or kind of a similar idea. But a lot of companies are using these skills. And so if you can just get Trello for free, and you can start using it for managing your own projects. And then you can put it on your website saying that your website or your LinkedIn as a skill you have. And so if you're applying for a startup company, regardless of what it is, if you can speak to using Trello, that's something that they're useful. If they don't have to train you to use Trello, that's one thing that they can kind of make an assumption about. And so this is a really powerful tool that you can use basically for free if you want. I think even our organization is currently, it says right here, it says we're on the free tier. So we're even an organization and we're using the free tier of this. So this is just like one tool that is a really intuitive, and there are more advanced project management tools, but a lot of companies start with Trello because it's kind of easy to get set up. It's easy to onboard, and it's intuitive. But that's really the basic idea of Trello, is that you have these multiple lists and you're able to make these different sets of cards, and you can edit each one of these cards, and you can move forward with that. That's very cool.
Joe, can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I through my walk, I'm back at my house. A lot of our students, we're talking to them about working virtually. And Trello is a great example of working virtually. Yet, would you sort of explain how working virtually really works, like how a day works and how Trello and these different tools operate and work in?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a really great question. So, I've been working for over 5 years working remotely, and like, what does my day look like? I roll out of bed. I do your normal get up. The benefit is if I want to stay in sweatpants, you can probably get away with it most of the time. That's a benefit. But really, it's cracking my laptop open. It's checking my Slack, and my email is the first thing I do. So I go through, I read any emails that I need to do first thing. I hop on Slack. I'll say hi to my team and say, good morning, everyone. I might throw a couple emojis out there and say, hey, just try to get people, engaged in the morning. And then really in a remote setting, your calendar is going to be such a critical component. My entire day is regimented by my calendar. I do have periods of time that are open, but because we're remote and someone can't just come and knock on my desk and say, hey, can we chat for a couple minutes? And you don't know what everyone's working on. Really, your calendar, you go look at your calendar of the person you want to talk to before you go talk to them, because you don't want to throw them off from what they're doing. And even though, you have this idea of Slack and it's asynchronous, which just means that it's what we're doing is synchronous right now. We're talking directly. There's no lag. Asynchronous means that there's going to be a potential lag. So even though someone might message me on Slack, it still could be a distraction. So a lot of times you'll go to the calendar first and kind of say, oh, is this person free? Or are they in a meeting? And then really most of my day is Zoom calls, going onto the project management board, seeing the things that were assigned to me, We use Jira, which is kind of an advanced form of Trello. Setting up different conversations in Slack, responding to different threads. There's lots of different digital platforms. So really, my day-to-day is basically Slack, either Google Hangouts or Zoom, depending on the company you work for, or Teams, some type of video chat. It doesn't have to be Slack, but it could be, Slack is very popular. So fundamentally, it's living in email, calendars, a project management board, some type of chat app, and really having the same kind of communications you would have in the office all over those platforms.
One of the first questions we have here, Joe, is what's the best website to create a personal and digital portfolio?
It's a great question. So both Wix and Squarespace are just so great. So when I got into software development like 8 or 9 years ago, Wix was not so great. And so I could get away with building a portfolio, building other people's portfolio websites or small business websites. Now you can start a business building websites on Square for other people who are not inclined to do that. I really like Square. I think it's very intuitive. We've used it in the past for different projects. And they have great templates for your personal website. And it's a really good way to kind of get involved in doing something like a personal website without really needing to know how to do software development. But Wix is also a really good option, very similar kind of point and click way to get set up. And if you don't know how to do something, there's a video online to do it. So if you don't know how to do it, you can do YouTube. How do I center my name on my Wix? And you can find it.
Yeah, YouTube's really useful. Let's see, you said, could you go over what GitHub is and how to use it?
Yeah, so GitHub is going to be a little bit more difficult, but I'll show you so you can kind of get an idea. And thank you for reminding me to speak about this. So something I want to point out is that I built this presentation I gave tonight for our presentation. So this is actually a website that is hosted on GitHub. So you'll notice that there's a GitHub title. So if I come back here, this is something that I actually coded up. And so if I go to GitHub, this is what GitHub looks like for a developer. And so all of the code that this website is running here is actually hosted on GitHub. And so let me see if I can show you an example. So this is what the code looks like. And just to give you an idea, you can see right here, executing a digital presence workshop. That's this. That's the same page. And if I go down the line, if I say, who am I? That's the who am I? And I won't go into the code bits, but the idea is that GitHub is where software developers post their code and share it so we can communicate and collaborate with other people. And the other thing that GitHub allows you to do is to host websites for free on certain types of websites, as long as they're open source, like this digital presence workshop. And open source just basically means that anyone can use this. So if you wanted to take my website right now and you learned a little bit about GitHub, you'd be able to copy this presentation and use it yourself. And I actually did that from myself. So I gave a presentation a couple months ago about a related thing that was specifically about getting into the tech field, and I built a presentation, and you can see it here. So you can see that these are all some changes that I made about 6 months ago. And so GitHub is really meant for software developers, but there's also great resources on getting started with GitHub. And actually, Spec is working on a program right now to help people become more familiar with it. Really, most of the internet, or most of the big companies that you use tools for, Facebook, for example, Facebook has tons and tons of code that they host online on GitHub. And so it's kind of like it's a collaborative tool specifically for software developers, but it gives you great capabilities. Like, even my personal website, you can see here, is hosted for free on GitHub. So if you go through the effort of learning a little bit more about coding, you get benefits like being able to host a website for free versus paying maybe $10 a month or something, or $5 a month on Wix or Squarespace. And so, and really, when people ask me, hey, Joe, how do you get into software development? What's the first thing I should do? I say, go make a personal website. It's like the best thing for you to do, because worst case scenario, if you didn't like coding at the end of it, at least you have a website that you can use for yourself. GitHub is definitely something hard to dig into too much, like actually walking through what we'd use, because there's a bit of coding component to it. There's lots of resources because it's open source. So if you're interested and you just look up, how to use GitHub, there's lots and lots of things you can look into.
One of the students asked a great question, and that was earlier in your talk. You mentioned doing a lot of reading,
Mm-hmm.
and the student asked if you had some recommendations on what to read.
I would say that one of the most important books for me, and it really shaped my own personal mission, is a book called The Most Good You Can Do, and is by Dr. Peter Singer. I believe that's who it's by. And that book really talks about asking yourself, if you're going to dedicate your life to doing good, how can you do that? And for every person, that's different. So there's different ways to do good. So maybe the most good you can do is actually just being a volunteer at a nonprofit, and that's your skill. The most good you can do could be become a hedge fund manager and make a ton of money and donate like 70% of your salary to charity. And they have examples of people in that book who've done just that. That book really helped me focus. Ultimately, I always ask myself, like, what is it that I want to do? And that was always trying to answer that question as a career. Like, do I want to be a software developer? Do I want to be an entrepreneur? Do I want to be a historian? And now I've decided I don't need to make the decision of what career I want to be when I grow up, because it's not about the career that I have as much as about the thing that I want to do most, which is to do the most good. So whatever I'm doing, I'm always focused on that. And that book is really helpful. Other books to read. There's so many. There's so many books to read. I think another one, I believe it's called A Genius in All of Us, or Genius Within You. I'll have to, maybe I can look that up. One thing I would just say as a general area of learning, if you're saying, where do I get started on transforming your career? The first thing I realized is that there's a lot of stuff I don't know. I graduated college, and what I learned is there's so much that I don't know. That's what I got from college more than anything else, is that the world is huge, and it opened my eyes to how much there is. And so what I asked myself is like, but I'm really bad at math and science. How am I going to overcome this? And so what I kind of realized is that I needed to rebuild my own cognitive processes. And so what I did is I read a lot about learning, like learning how to learn. And there's actually a great course on Coursera. It's actually one of the most popular courses ever, called Learning How to Learn. And that course is it's run by a woman named Barbara Oakley, Dr. Barbara Oakley. She's a professor of software or of engineering, and she has written several books. And I would just say, read all of Barbara Oakley's books. They're all about learning how to learn, and really taking your understanding of how your own mental processes work and applying them to be successful in your career. So, something you will learn once you get out of college and get in the real world is people are going to ask you to do something that you weren't trained to do. And so how do you do that? How do you go from not knowing something to breaking down that thing into bite-sized chunks and understanding that? And so I would say read more about cognitive science, about learning, educational psychology, and just, memory. I think there's another good, that's Mind Performance Hacks, that book I picked up. Anything I could to overcome my fear of math and science. That was a challenge. And those things were really helpful to do that.
Yeah, math and science isn't scary, right?
No, not at all.
I have two more questions, but I want to invite people to just ask questions verbally if they want through the Zoom rather than the chat. Is there anybody that's on the edge of their seat wants to ask something before I shout out another one?
Can I put somebody on the spot, Mike? Because I love doing this.
Yeah, sure.
First of all, I got to say, I have loved talking to Joe. I think I've taken up too much part of Joe's life, but it's been real fascinating talking to him about the digital presence and the collaboration. Marie Torrey has been working with us hand in hand on this through the CPRC. Marie, can you take up a little bit what Joe's been talking about tonight and tell about why interns and jobs are looking increasingly for these kinds of digital presence skills? That's right. So Marie, so I told you I was scary, Marie.
Yes, Palmer. So as many of you know, my name is Marie Torrey and I work in the Career and Professional Readiness Center. And the reason why we had Joe come tonight is he's, basically everything that we tell you to do in the CPRC and the School of Business tells you to do. He's reiterating that to you. So, especially with the competitive job market, I graduated during the recession, and now many of you are going to graduate during a pandemic. Unfortunately, this is not going to be over anytime soon. So the more that you can make yourself marketable, the better. So creating that LinkedIn profile and having that same digital presence into your digital portfolio. And like we said, that personal brand should stay consistent throughout the different digital presences that you have across the internet. And then when it comes to internships are huge as well. The students that have internships are more likely to get hired than those that do not. So even though it can be challenging during these times to get an internship, you can come visit our office and we can help you with that. But let's think outside the box. Let's look at micro internships. Let's look at projects. Let's look at other ways that we can help you build experience besides that 150-hour internship that you need. Let's think about that a little bit differently.
Marie, it might be fair to say that every student here, there's an excellent chance that their first internship may be a digital internship, a remote internship. So the difference between now and just even 6 months ago is that these skill sets that we might have thought 6 months ago were nice to have, they're going to be absolutely so essential. So Joe, who's been doing this for 5 years, all of a sudden the world has changed. I mean, I was reading something the other day about internships are just basically they're going to be probably moving more toward a digital domain. So your ability to say, I can do this digitally. I've used Microsoft Teams. I've used Slack. I've used Trello. I've used project planning, different things like this. I think it's going to make an incredible difference in your ability to get these kind of internships and then later these kind of jobs.
Absolutely. And I also say too, you're going to be home for a couple of months. So take advantage of these opportunities. Do a skills test on LinkedIn. Start building your portfolio. Build your LinkedIn profile. Play around with Slack like he mentioned, or complete a free course. There's so many learning resources, and I believe Joe's going to share those with you tonight. And we have some listed on our COVID handout for the CPRC. So you having these different experiences are going to lead to better opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, I wish my career center was like this hip to what you need to do, and like these internships are going to be so critical. You don't realize once you leave college, you can't get internships. Like they literally prevent you from getting them, or they're very difficult to get them. And so while you're still here, utilize them when you can. And I think the other bit is that there's very few bits of knowledge that's not useful. And so do as many courses as you can in college, out of college, audit classes. Like the more you can speak to, the more that you're able to communicate with people, the better, right? Like I'm not using everything I went to college for, but it was still very helpful. All the writing and communication skills that I got from humanities, that comes, and the same thing comes from the other side. So the more you can do, like those micro internships or creating projects or doing courses, that's going to really help round you out and make you competitive. Because when I graduated during a recession as well. And it was hard. It took me like 2 years to get a job. Like when I was saying I was doing that string of work, it was like 2 solid years of like doing all of that learning until I could find work. And, it's going to be a tough market with the pandemic, but I think these skills that the folks here at your university or college is promoting is really going to be critical to whether or not you're going to get a job and be able to land something.
Joe, let me ask you this, which is a question from one of our students. How do you maintain your drive and passion even though you work virtually?
Maybe I'm not the best person to answer that, because I do find that people in general just ask me like, Joe, how do you stay so passionate? I think that the most important thing is that I have never sacrificed my ethical, moral compass to move my career forward. That is the most important thing. I had a job opportunity. I mentioned New York City and San Francisco. That job I got right before the job offer in San Francisco. And it was at a company that I really didn't like their business model. I didn't feel like it was ethical. And it was my first job. And my parents are like, you're taking that job. It doesn't matter what. They're like, you're out of college. You need to find a job. And I was really like, I don't want this job. And I was lucky that that recruiter had hit me up right after I got that job offer. I had a job offer basically in hand. And they flew me out to San Francisco, and it was a company working in this educational technology space. And it was about saving students money on their textbooks, which I knew all too well was just so painful for students. And I said, I want to do something where I'm making a difference, even if it's small. And I went with the job, and it ended up being a better job opportunity. And I've really stuck with that. And so I don't feel like when I go to work, oh, this is a slog. This is not what I want to do. I don't do that. I've really held out, and sometimes you can't. It's hard, right? I wasn't making the world better. Well, maybe I was making someone's landscaping better, but it wasn't. Sometimes you have to work a job you don't want. But I think now, as I've been a professional in my field for a while, choosing companies that I really felt like were doing the things that I think I wanted to see in the world, that excites me every single day. Because those companies attract people who are like-minded, right? And I get to work with a bunch of really passionate people about doing good stuff. And in our case, it's trying to help businesses and small businesses and individuals be able to participate in the economy. And that's impactful, especially right now more than ever. So I would say go, it's hard. And my passions didn't immediately take me to where I was, but what did take me to where I am today is believing and making a difference. That was the most important thing.
Do you think you could say who has been your biggest influence?
I mean, I do choose the Buckminster Fuller quote. He is really a very influential person. But I would say that ultimately, I think my biggest influence was my grandfather, who I was named after. He was an immigrant from Malta. He came to the United States after Malta was bombed after World War II. He had some education in Malta, but had basically redo his entire education when he came to the United States. He worked as a television repair person for a while. Then he went to a community college, worked his way up. He became an engineer, electrical engineer, IBM. When he left, I think they needed like 3 people to replace him. He spoke 6 or 7 languages. He was a master gardener. He did all the taxes for every person in his neighborhood. He basically made IBM. He refused to go into the smoking section before smoking was a deal, and he actually, in his branch of IBM, made it so they had a separate smoking section, and eventually they, adopted not having smoking indoors way later. So I think my grandfather was the biggest influence, and he's the the person that really motivates me to this day. That hopefully I can be as amazing as he was in his career and his life.
That's an awesome story. I know we're pressed for time here, and one thing I would just like to do is, if I could, is share with everybody here. I have set up some example websites on Google Sites and on Wix for Bana Student Example, and I would like to invite everybody to let me know if you want these resources, if you want to discuss them further, or if you just want me to send them out to you. You can get a hold of me and just I'll just help you get started in that way. But otherwise, I think we're kind of out of time. Unless anybody has something they want to shout out quick, I will.
Michael, I was just going to say that everyone here feel free to contact me. You can share my spec email with everybody, and feel free to reach out if you're interested in what we're doing at spec, or if you're interested in what I talked about today and you have questions. I'm happy to answer questions via email or hop on a call. I might not be able to get back to you immediately, but I really like to make myself available for people who are interested in what we're doing, as well as, at Spec, we are very focused on helping people find careers. So that's something that we'd like to help others with.
That's terrific. Thank you, Joe. And I can facilitate that for anybody that needs to. If you want to get a hold of me, and I can get you in touch with Joe. So thank you so much, Joe. You had such a powerful message and knowledge of such an array of tools. I can't thank you enough for sharing your insight with our students.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I do hope this is a beginning in a long list of collaborative projects between you and St. Bonaventure. I also really need to thank our CPRC, both Pam Furman and Marie Torrey. Without them, we would not have been able to pull this off, I don't think. And of course, I have to thank Todd Palmer. This project was actually Palmer's idea, and he is good. He is just full of good ideas. So he always puts our students first. So that's
Mike, I'm definitely full of it. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Todd.
I got to say one thing, Mike, and it's been great talking with Joe and great working with Marie and Pam, and especially you. All the students, the number one thing we want you guys, well, it's a couple things. Number one, we want you to learn. We want you to have a great time, the college experience, but just as important, we're looking for your future. And I got to say, I work with people every day, Marie, Mike, Dean James, and we're all focusing on what can we do to help you have the best life ever and being able to do the best work for everybody you can. So please, please take these lessons to heart. Education doesn't stop when you get a degree. It's just the beginning. I love Joe's story because Joe knows that to live in this world, the world we live in, you're constantly reinventing yourself. You're constantly learning things. So Joe, I'd like to salute you because you're a great speaker tonight. And I learned a lot talking to you and over all this time.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you again. It was a pleasure to speak. And like Michael said, I'd be happy to come back and collaborate on future projects. So it's been a pleasure.
Terrific. All right.
All right.
And there's a whole list in the chat of thank you. So
thank you.
I'm sure you can see that.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.